So Oral Tracey the Maverick did a whole video saying he wasn't talking to me. Well, whether you talking to me or not, Tracey, I'm talking to you. Because you're so far off course, somebody needs to set you straight. And this one actually needs a line-by-line response because you did misquote me and misrepresent me a couple of times. Hi, thanks so much for joining me. I'm Dionne Jackson Miller. It's time for tea. So Maverick saw a video that I did saying he was wrong to suggest that schoolboys seen on video assaulting a young girl should be put in a cell with big men to be assaulted themselves. That's supposed to be punishing them and trying to get them to change their ways. So he says he's not talking to me about the issue because I say I never watched the video. Look, I am not apologizing for this. I don't need to sit and watch a young girl being hurt to understand what has happened. I'm a woman. I don't need to sit and watch a young girl's pain to be able to comment on the facts of a case. And a lot of you who watch these videos and share them, quite frankly, need to stop. Especially sharing them, you need to stop. In fact, even in this case, the police had to be telling the public to stop sharing the video. They said it could further traumatize the child and it could also impede the investigation. Also, sharing videos like that is against the law. We're talking about possible breaches of the Child Pornography Prevention Act that carries penalties of up to 20 years in prison. Now, Tracey says I'm a lawyer and that not watching the video is like going to court without looking at the evidence and just arguing off idealism. No, I'm not arguing off idealism. I'm arguing off factual accounts. Nobody has said that my account of what was in the video was wrong, and that's because it has been widely reported. The only possible reason that Tracey and the rest of you who agree with him that I must watch this video or people must watch the video before they can comment is because you think we all need to see the video to be whipped into this froth of anger so that we can then start agreeing to all kinds of barbaric punishments, which was Tracey's proposal. Now, this kind of approach of dealing with things is basically policy making and lawmaking by vibes, all right? You get vexed, so you throw humanity and research and common sense to the winds and you try and come up with more and more barbaric punishments in an effort to deal with a particular situation, ignoring the data and the research as to whether those kinds of punishments would actually help the situation and actually make society safer. And I thought that was the whole point. I thought that's what we all wanted, a safer Jamaica. So, look, I said in the first video that I am deeply hurt by this. And the fact that I'm not here cussing bad word and beating my chest doesn't mean I'm not deeply affected by it. We just show things differently, all right? And I don't think we get to a safer society by trying to make a law with blood in our eye, right? A blood for blood, eye for eye situation is not the most effective way of trying to get to a safer society. And for those people who are saying, oh, if it was fun, if Dionne should I agree with Tracey, what I would say to you is that that is one of the reasons that we do not allow people who have a personal involvement in a matter to decide on a case, because we know that they're emotional, we know that they're hurt, and therefore they're not going to be approaching the situation based on the law, based on the logic, based on even what is the best solution in a given situation. Now, Tracey also says that like all lawyers, according to him, I vacillate a lot. He says lawyers don't come down on one side or the other. It's like they don't have any opinions. You know, this kind of generalization is crazy to try and respond to that. But this was actually one of the parts of Tracey's videos that I couldn't understand at all. The whole video was my opinion though. So in case you missed it, Tracey, let me be very clear. My opinion, bolstered by research and evidence, is that locking up minors who committed a violent crime and then subjecting them to violence, supposedly to punish them and teach them a lesson and make them change, isn't going to achieve that. It's going to make them worse. They're going to come out worse. And then it's going to be worse for all of us who live in society. The fact that I don't agree with you doesn't mean I'm vacillating, and there is no vacillation at all in my opinion. What Tracey suggested is wrong. It's unhelpful. It's based, as I said, on wanting blood for blood and an eye for an eye. And while that will satisfy our thirst for revenge in the short term, in the long term, it is not helping Jamaica. Speaking of research, Tracey says, I always like to pull for international research. And I'm not sure why the fact that I like my videos to be evidence-based and based on research is a problem, or is being made to sound like a negative. If every day I just hear something and I start chat off the top of my head, right? Just start chat based on vibes, just shooting off my mouth based on vibes without having any research, without being able to bring you any information on the issue, without being able to share an opinion that's actually informed. How am I helping you? How am I moving the conversation forward? How am I taking you beyond the kind of uninformed chatting that might take place in a lunchroom or shouting at the bar? Look, we all have our approach and style, and yes, my approach is to give you opinion based on research, to bring that to the space. And thank you, Tracey. I'm glad you recognize that. No, yes, I do research. I look at what happens in Jamaica. I look at what happens overseas. I look at what the research says works. Why wouldn't we want to do research, right? Man can't just a chat every day based on nothing. No, man. You have to bring something to the table. So then now, Tracey says, I pull for international research to speak about children's incapacity to make right or wrong decisions. First of all, I never said that, all right? I never said children don't have the capacity to make right or wrong decisions. What I said is that their judgment and their decision making is not as developed as that of adults. This is exactly what I said. I said there's a ton of research saying that teenagers' brains are less developed than the brains of adults and that they don't have the same judgment and decision-making ability. To say they don't have the same decision-making ability as adults is not to say that they don't have any. Nuance is a thing, you know. I also don't know what's the problem Tracey has with my quoting research from overseas about adolescent brains. Man, no, Tracey, you think that Jamaican teenagers have brains different from brains elsewhere? Because the research is actually very consistent on this point. Then he says that things are happening in Jamaica, violent and gruesome crime, and that at some point we have to take measures to address these issues before society implodes. I agree with that, you know. I don't think we're doing enough to deal with children at risk or children in conflict with the law. What I disagree with is this violent, barbaric act that we must allow boys to be assaulted by men to teach them a lesson. I think we need truancy officers making sure children are in school. We need more social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, guidance counselors, social programs to help children and families in need. I've spoken to a whole heap of experts working in this area. I'm not talking off the top of my head. Then in another leap of logic, or maybe I should say illogic, Tracey says that according to Dionne and her research, a 17-and-a-half-year-old boy doesn't know what he's doing, but at 18 he knows what he's doing. Again, Tracey is misquoting me because we never said nothing like that. So it is obviously true that the day before your 18th birthday, you're legally a child, and then when you turn 18, you're legally an adult. And obviously, there's not going to be some kind of magical transformation that your brain does in that period of time. The research does say, as I mentioned, that your brain continues to develop into your 20s. So even when you've legally become an adult at 18, yes, your brain is still developing. Countries have to pick an age at which legal adulthood begins, and many countries have chosen 18 as that age, as an age at which people have enough maturity to be treated as adults. The Convention on the Rights of the Child, for instance, the most ratified human rights treaty in the world, defines as children are people under the age of 18. Just to make the point, though, that the recognition of the fact that people's brains are still developing and that 18 is still young, that's why youth is a mitigating factor in sentencing. Then now, Tracey talks about people he calls over-educated. According to him, over-educated people have too much information. That's why they vacillate, they avoid offending every side while the country continues to burn. And he asks, is it any wonder that people resort to dealing with the done instead of dealing with the courts? So yeah, I'm educated. Some people might say I'm highly educated. And again, I'm not ashamed of that. I am proud of that, right? That's a good thing. It's not a negative. And I don't think I've ever been accused of being afraid to take a position. And again, I'm not vacillating on this issue at all. My position is clear and I've explained it. Also, Tracey is conflating issues. He's saying, Overeducated people vacillate. They don't do anything. The country burns, and people prefer to deal with the done rather than the courts. We don't even know if we start with that, a bunch of mix up there, right? So I'll just say delay and inefficiency in the courts is a problem. Vigilante justice in Jamaica is a problem. But here's the thing. There are lots of very highly educated people in countries that have low crime rates and do not have a problem with vigilante justice. Correlation isn't causation. In other words, you can have two things existing at the same time. It doesn't mean that one causes the other. You know how I know that though? Because I believe in research, and that's what research says. So how to deal with juvenile crime though? And it's true, I hadn't put forward specific proposals in my first video because I was focused on responding to Tracey's proposal. But we know what we need to do. We just don't want to do it. I already spoke, for instance, about needing more social workers, guidance counselors, and so on. And yes, absolutely victims of violent crime, including this child involved here, need to get as much support as possible. Counseling and preferably restitution in money from the offender or their family to help to get their life back on track. Now, Olga Isasa, she's a representative for UNICEF Jamaica. She wrote about how to deal with violent crime, and she spoke about the same issue I've been talking about, saying that the brains of teenagers aren't fully developed. She says exposing them to trauma, including imprisonment, locking them up, can further impede their brain development. It can harm their ability to self-regulate, in other words, to check themselves, and it can heighten the risk of offending. She says the most effective way to ensure public safety is through rehabilitation, not punishment. She points out that children who commit violent crime often have a whole heap of factors dealing with that are beyond their control. For instance, family violence, abuse, neglect, trauma, educational exclusion, they're not in school, socioeconomic disadvantage, poverty in the family, drugs and alcohol addiction, and mental health issues. And she says studies show the most effective way to respond to youth crime is through rehabilitation and therapy. She says those kinds of programs reduce recidivism rates by up to 40%. That's the rate at which they go out and commit more crime. So therapy and rehabilitation actually reduce that. Imprisonment, on the other hand, increases the likelihood that they're going to reoffend, and it puts us, the public, at greater risk. And she points out that there's a whole heap of evidence that shows that locking up children is counterproductive, that there is an alarming percentage of children who have spent time in correctional centers who go on to reoffend into adulthood. The more we lock them up, the higher the rates at which they go out and reoffend. I don't know about you, that doesn't sound to me as if that is the best solution for society and for us who have to live in it. It's not about being soft on juvenile crime. It's about what research has shown to be the best way of rehabilitating them, not just in their best interest, but in ours. Wow, there I go again. Doing research, not just shooting my mouth off. Who ever heard of something like that? Shocking, I tell you, shocking. Look, let me leave Tracey and go drink my tea here. I'm Dionne Jackson Miller. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.